How's it going, YouTube? Rile got banned. So, what are the decks that are going to be in the meta that you should expect to see at your next event? Let's just jump right in. So, first 3 lists, I'll say, because they're in the same vein, same champion at least, which is Guo Jia. And it's going to be Wind Seiryuu, it's going to be Fire Suzaku, and it's actually going to be Water Genbu. So all 3 of these decks are Genbu decks, and that's why they're all kind of being put up the front here. 2 of those decks were really good even during this meta. Wind Seiryuu, which literally won Ascent Taipei, and Fire Suzaku, which came second at Ascent Taipei, are both really, really solid decks. Fire Suzaku didn't really lose that much with Rile. They lost a little bit of like explosiveness is how to put it, but they can just swap those cards out with damage cards, and I think they'll be sitting fine, honestly. They were already doing that before this meta. Even during this meta, some people weren't even playing the Rile package and were doing well with it, so definitely expect to see Fire Suzaku still be a thing. And then third, Water Genbu. Because people are going to be playing a little less graveyard hate, specifically, floating memory or even like, liminal hate, Genbu becomes a little bit better. It might take some time for that to occur, right? As people start to build their deck list, and some people might keep Censor in or even the side, just a little more worried about, something like Genbu coming back into the meta. But it's still going to be a very solid deck list. It was really, really good before DTR. It was probably the best. Now it did lose Lost in Thought. We got some major cards to go alongside of it. Liminal Guide still really good in Genbu, and Thronekeeper Bullfrog, a very, very solid ally for defense to keep your Bovines alive, to keep your Frostborn Paladins alive. It's just a solid ally that you can also Primordial Ritual, so definitely expect to see Genbu be there. But because those 3 decks are going to be in the meta, because those decks are going to be played, you have to realize that Wind Assassin is going to be coming back, because Wind Assassin loves preying on Genbu allied decks because they get to play Ensnaring Fumes, and Ensnaring Fumes is like a sometimes free out to these decks, right? Specifically Wind Luxem Xander, which was being pushed out of the meta by these other level 3 Rile decks because of how efficiently they got to level 3 and how much the pressure they could apply once they got there. Wind Luxem Xander just couldn't keep up. So Wind Luxem Xander, I expect to see it to be pushed back into the meta a little bit. And especially if those Genbu allied decks are coming in more, then it will as well, because you can just go Art of War and Ensnaring Fumes, put your Genbu back into your material deck, and now your major win con of the deck for a lot of those decks is just gone. And then if it's playing Art of War, then it can stop the ally-centric, where they put a bunch of allies on board and attack you, ally-type decks, which we'll get to a little bit later, and just really slow down all those game plans. So definitely expect to see Wind Luxem Xander become part of the meta, and because of that, also Wind Assassin Tristan. It was good during this meta. It was good during Rile meta. It was good during before Rile meta. It's going to be good during this new ban and restriction post-ban Rile meta. Definitely expect to see Wind Tristan. They can play Ensnaring Fumes as well. It doesn't really play Art of War, so it's a little worse against some of those ally decks, but it can still have a very solid game plan against Genjus, where they can just hold up a decent amount of cards, return your Genju to your hand, and then they just get their allies back to their hand, and then continue on with their game plan and have quite a bit more safety. Those 5 decks out of the way. I think you're going to see those 5 decks, almost certainly. The next couple decks I want to talk about are some of the little bit more unique decks. I guess one of them isn't. One's kind of right in the middle of these two categories I'll put, which is Water Allies, actually. Water Allies isn't played that often, but is a very solid deck, and it's going to probably change how it's played a little bit here. It doesn't have to try to race to put damage and like a bunch of force on board against these Rile decks to try to kill them quickly before they die. Instead, they're going to be playing a little bit more of a control plan like they used to. So they're going to have a little bit more, I think, negates held up in hand, a little more interaction held in hand. Before, they kind of just put down allies and started doing like almost like wind allies, at least of the old days, and just start swinging and using Halicline Scouts to beat down your opponent, and use lunettes and these unique human allies to help beat down your opponents as well. Using lunettes to slow down your opponent just a little bit from killing off your board. So definitely expect Water Allies to be coming into, it probably won't be any more popular than it was before, but I think it's still a very solid deck and something that you should be aware of at the very least that someone could be on. So when you see a Water Spirit, it's not like, oh, that's Genbu. It could be, well, it might be Genbu, but it might actually just be Water Allies in disguise. Now we're getting to the last 2 categories, I guess I'll call it, which is one of them being Fire not assassin, but fire aggro in general. Now, fire Suzaku does fall into this category, but I think Fiza, which was really solid, obviously we saw it at Worlds. We even saw it during this kind of meta. Definitely expect to see it. It's going to be definitely a thing, obviously, again, but like also fire aggro Lorraine and probably some other fire aggro decks. You know, might see even Tony. I guess I can put suited in here as well. Problem with all these decks is that they can be really hurt by Art of War and Ensnaring Fumes. So like I said, I think when Luxem damage can come back in the meta a little bit, so definitely expect to also see all those fire aggro decks to be a little scared of that deck. They're going to be trying playing different builds, you know, experimenting. When Lorraine or not Win Lorraine, I'm sorry, Fire Aggro Lorraine can be really good because it can actually just do some big attacks instead of, you know, going all in on the allies board. But sometimes they have to go on the allies board. But we also have a lot more fire graveyard stuff. So, you know, we haven't seen March Hare and Red Hair and, you know, Zhao Chao's and Arthur's and Courtesans and Kindle effects being played too often. We see it a little bit here and there, but it wasn't like really prominent. And I'm getting the thought, at least I think people are going to be shifting a little bit towards that, right? As Rile kind of lowers, they're like, okay, what's another strong package we put in instead of Rile? Well, it's going to be Fire Graveyard. And so because of that, people are going to probably start running Lantern eventually as well, which again, also does hurt Genbu, but that's getting a little bit too much of a stack on a stack, you know, kind of in response to they're playing this card, I'm going to play this card in my deck, and if they're playing that card, I'm going to do this. So I won't get too much into that, but just be aware that fire aggro will be something. Obviously, it always is, but it's going to be, I think, a little bit more prominent now, at least different flavors of it other than Suzaku. This one is kind of just a gut feeling. There's no real, like, there's no 100% guarantee that this will actually be in the meta, but I think it's just wise to, first of all, to think about, even if if you're a Rile player, if you love playing Rile the Abyss and running decks that had it, I think fire decks are still going to be decently strong. Liminal Guide is just such a powerhouse of a single card that if you can pitch off a Creative Shock, pitch it off a Hasty Messenger, other effects, you know, like Flamme Sorcelle, for specifically, that is a specific CL card. I think it's going to be around. I think fire decks are going to be able to still use a little bit of that extra value package in some way. You know, they're going to start going for discard still, but it's just not going to be as explosive. It's going to be a little bit more tamed, and we'll see how those decks do. It might take, you know, instead of just fire decks in general being able to have a game plan like that, they will honestly just be more like specifically Fire CL, maybe specifically Fire Lorraine and Fire Merlin, but not all the other fire decks that we saw starting to come up into the meta. I think it'll be like a 1 or 2 of fire decks that seem to do really well. Could be honestly just CL because they have Flamme Sorcelle. It could be different. Maybe Luxem, Fire Luxem still was okay. It was a little on the weaker side, but you know, maybe it's able to use some of these cards still and get some kind of value from it. I keep saying CL because level 2 you are able to discard stuff off its on enter, and that can be honestly the same as using like a Creative Shock on that turn, and so you can still gain value in some way, shape, or form from that, but it just won't be as, like I said, explosive. So expect to see some fire decks. At the end of the day, guys, keep experimenting. This is, you know, the best part of ban restrictions is that it opens up new ideas. At least it should be opening up ideas, new avenues, new ways you can build decks, and go out there and explore and find what types of decks could be good now that Rile doesn't feel so oppressive to you and your deck and game plan. In any case, guys, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.